I think a leader brings out the best in the people they work with. I'm trying to think of the leaders that I've been around. They accomplish the goals of your organization, but they also bring out the best in the people that are around them to achieve those goals. So that's kind of how I see a leader, somebody who you respect, somebody you want to be around and one you want to work with. And you asked, how do I see the mayor in this?
How does that definition of leadership translate into the role of mayor?
Well, I think the one big challenge that a mayor has is working with the city council, because you're separate but equal. So they're elected separately. They have their own I don't know what you call it, rules, but their own goals and things like that. And so I think if I look back at my time with Jack Spiker, he did such a good job of including the city council in all the things that happened with the city. And I think that's what the mayor has to do. You've got to go out and you've got to establish confidence with the members of the community. And in my case, I think it would be reestablish that trust with government. You've got to establish that trust with the employees, that they're going to be safe and well taken care of. And you've also got to establish a relationship with the city council. So I see all of those things being really important as far as a leader. I look at the city council kind of like a board of directors, and their job is to set the priorities, or to set the I would say the priorities, or to pass the ordinances, rules, appropriate money, and it's the mayor's job to implement those the best that they can. But also I think the mayor has to have a vision and share that with the community's vision, and share that with the council. So, yeah. But I think it's bringing out the best in others and achieving the goals of your organization.
As a follow-up, how important do you feel it is for the mayor to be an ambassador for our community, setting a good example both in person and online?
It's imperative, I think. I think when you're out in public, you are the face of the city. When you write stuff, people are going to look at that as being something coming from the city. I think it's imperative that you do that.
Through the years, the relationship between the city council and the mayor's office has eroded, impeding the work that needs to get done for the citizens of Cheyenne. How would you repair this relationship?
Well, I think I've already started. I've been having lunches and meetings with both candidates and city council people since March, and I'm having lunch with another one on Friday. And I think what Jack did a really good job of, Mayor Spiker, was we had formal meetings, but we also had informal times where we got a chance to get together and know each other. And I think that helps develop a little bit of a trust. In our case, a lot of trust. And so I think it's important to have both, formal opportunities like goal setting sessions and things like that, but also informal opportunities. One of the things that I think would be important is if I get invited, like say, to come to Rotary and speak, I would try to invite a council person to come just as part of that, and just include them in the day-to-day stuff that we do. If we're having meetings with a developer or something that's in Ward 1 or Ward 2, I would make sure that maybe one or two of those council people were involved, so that they understood things weren't surprises to them. I think transparency and communication is really critical. And I think I have a real advantage. I spent 12 years in the city council, so I remember the things that made me upset, and the slights that we felt from the administration, and I also remember the things that worked really well. And I will learn from those lessons and try to do a good job in that area.
Thank you. Go. Question 3. If you are elected mayor, what would you want your relationship with city staff to be, and how would you make sure that happens?
Well, I would hope that we'd have a good, warm relationship. When I was on city council for the 12 years, one of the things that I left, I came in thinking, the old story about municipal employees or government employees, they're not, there's 5 of them watching one guy dig, that kind of thing. And I found the opposite to be true. I found they were hardworking, they felt a mission, they were dedicated to doing those things. So I have a lot of respect for the employees. I think one of the things is you just got to show up and say hi. You got to be there on a regular basis. I would hope to be able to do that. One of the things I'll share with you guys that I want to do is I want to hire a professional chief of staff, somebody who's got a master's in public administration, maybe a decade of experience working in cities. Because I think what I've seen some mayors fall into the trap is they're in the office all the time. They're looking at budgets, they're doing all the day-to-day stuff, and they don't ever have time to get out. And I think that's important. Get out to the employees, get out to the community. So I'm really looking forward to that. I think the employees need to know they're valued, that they're going to be protected. And the way they're going to know that is if we have constant positive communication. If things are bad, we just got to let them know, but we got to make those decisions quickly. And things are good, we need to let them know and that they're protected. But I think the key one of the key takeaways I took away from my 12 years was how good our city employees were at that time. And I think that's going to be a real asset for us.
As a follow-up, if you found out that morale was down among city employees, what would you do in response?
I had kind of a unique experience here just recently. I did a focus group of an unbelievably diverse group of people. And I didn't talk, I had a moderator, but I sat and listened. And we asked a lot of questions like open-ended questions, do you feel safe? Things like that. And I got a lot of really good information from that. And I think I would probably do something along those lines where we would sit down and I would just listen to try to understand what's going on and see what I could do to help with that. If it was because we had bad management, obviously we would address that and fix it. If it's because we weren't communicating and they didn't have the information, we'd want to make sure they got the information, but we'd have to figure out what that was. But I found that to be a really powerful tool. We'd spent 6 hours over 2 nights together, and it was really powerful. And I think that kind of a process is something that I want to do in a lot of different areas going forward.
What programs or policies would you put in place to provide support for the people in Cheyenne who are homeless or are low or middle income to ensure that they can have their basic needs met and can withstand future crises?
I think that's a challenging question, and I would tell you that in a lot of these areas, I don't know that that is really a city's responsibility. How do you say this? I think we need to work with our state, federal partners to make sure that the resources that they have available are here. I think we need to work with the nonprofits to make sure that we're not duplicating services and to put like a board of boards together of the nonprofits so that we all know what everybody's doing, so that people know where they can go or they can be referred. But we have a $50 million budget. We could spend every penny of that on these issues, and I don't think we would solve them. I think that a lot of those kinds of issues are maybe outside of the city's responsibility. However, I think there's a lot of things that we can do. We can work towards trying to make sure that we make the process for building housing easier and less expensive so that we can have more housing and more affordable housing. I think we can look at all our rules and regulations and see if there's impediments that we have systemically that we could overcome to try to help with that. But as far as like providing mental health counseling, those types of things, I'm just not sure that that's the city's responsibility. But I think we need to be using our bully pulpit as a city to try to come up with as many of the resources that are out there and make sure that people know where they're at.
In Cheyenne, affordable housing and living wage jobs are a chicken and egg scenario. People can't afford to live in Cheyenne as housing prices rise, but companies don't move to Cheyenne because there aren't enough available skilled workers. How would you tackle this problem?
Okay, so this is one I've been working on since February, March. I have met with as many people as will meet with me, engineers, architects, planners, developers, builders, tradespeople, to try to find out what's going well and what's not going well. And when it comes to housing and affordable housing, I think there are a couple of things that we need to work on. One of them is infrastructure, and the other one of them is our rules and regulations. So starting with rules and regulations, we passed the UDC, the Uniform Development Code, in 2012. It won national, it won international awards. You know, it's a very pretty document. And, but I think now 8 years later, I think that we need to go back and review that to make sure that our goals, like making housing more affordable, having more housing, are met by the rules and regulations that we have. I'll give you one example that I've been talking about. When we build an apartment building right now, you can only cover 60% of the area with impervious surface, so the building and the parking lot, and the rest of it's going to be in landscaping. And I love landscaping, but that's 40% of the property that's not being used. And as I'm doing research, I'm finding that a lot of communities, if you meet certain criteria, can go up to as much as 80%, which means you can get more units on the property, the cost per unit would be lower, and we could help with, because land is so hard to get here in Cheyenne, we need to be able to maximize what we're doing there. So I think we have some systemic problems with the UDC that we can overcome and work on it. I met with Mayor Kinski from Sheridan, and he shared with me that they had a similar concern in Sheridan, and they hired a group called the Zuber Group. And I've tried as hard as I can to find the Zuber Group, and I can't find them. But I'm sure there's other groups like that out there. And they met with all the same people that I've been meeting with, and they talked about what are all the concerns they have. And they met with city staff in Sheridan and the planners and understood their perspective. And then they tried to match the UDC, their UDC, with the community goals, and they found 98 instances where they didn't match, and they recommended language to fix that. And once they did that, their Main Street, I mean, they saw a boom in that area. My wife is from there. My son lives up there, so as I drive up there, I can see the changes that have happened, and it's been pretty spectacular. So I think we need to do that. The second thing is that there's a developer right now that could build 192 apartment buildings and 300 single-family homes under $250,000 in land already annexed in the city. But he can't do it because there's not a sewer line there. So when we designed the EUL, the Enhanced Use Lease on the base for the 400 apartments that'll go there, and for the commercial property, they took the sewer capacity for that project and allocated it there. So he's ready to build today, but he can't because there's no sewer. Interesting is the Southside Water and Sewer District is there, and they have the capacity now to do it. So I think as mayor, we need to work with outside agencies and assure them that we'll be a good partner, because he could build those things starting today. But the other thing is that we need to build a sewer line there. We also probably need to build a couple roads. And I don't think we use all the tools. You know, I don't know why we couldn't do a TIF district for that area, and it would be a large area. And as those homes come online, the property taxes for that could go back to pay back the cost of doing the infrastructure. And I don't know how long it would take. I haven't done the analysis, but it wouldn't take very long to repay that cost, and especially as builders build and hook onto it. And we could do that and speed up that process and fast track it. So I think we need to look at the idea that the community owns the infrastructure, and we need to look at where our community goals are, what our goals are. We want to build more affordable housing. Where could we do that? And put the infrastructure in. And the old saying, if you build it, they'll come. In Cheyenne, I think that's really true. Perfect example of that is Sweetgrass. I met with Tim Wilson and Jerry Jessen, who was their board chair. It's been, I don't know, 15 years ago, or maybe a little longer than that ago. And we talked about where we were going to grow. And I said, I look at the area south of LCCC and South Cheyenne is the area that we have the biggest capacity for growth. But what we don't have is a water line. So when were they going to build that great big water line? And they shared it was 25 years down the road. And I'm like, guys, I think it needs to be 5 years down the road, because if we don't build the infrastructure, we'll have no way to build. And the city, if it's green and growing or it's ripe and rotting, we don't want to be ripe and rotting. And so to their credit, when they did their next big meeting, their goal setting meeting, they looked at that and they changed their rules or their vision for when that needed to be done. They built that water line, and now Sweetgrass is building 2,000 acre development. And the first phase of that is almost 100% sold out, and they're getting ready to open their second phase. And I think that's what we need to do is to look at what our goals are and how we can get those that infrastructure in place to do it. So we need to fix the rules to make it easier, more timely. I'll tell you another thing I've learned is we have a flow chart when you start a process, and that flow chart tells you how long it's going to be, and it's really pretty. But the problem is that when you get done with a phase, the city has so many days to answer back, and each phase through that process, it costs the developer a week. So if we would just tweak that by a couple of days, we could save a month or more in the process from the start to the finish of that project. So I think there's a lot that we could do to help with that.
additional thoughts on that chicken and egg piece. You said, build it and they will come. Is that, anything else that you want to say as it relates to companies coming and that skilled worker piece?
Well, a couple of things come to mind. One of them is that I've met with 2 or 3 businesses recently that told me that if they knew what it was going to take to develop in Cheyenne, they wouldn't have started their project. So we've got to get that fixed, because when we screw up those opportunities for those kinds of companies, they're going to talk, and fewer of those opportunities are going to come to Cheyenne. So we've got to make sure that we're more business friendly and we do a better job of making that process work. As far as the chicken and the egg, I'm thinking that if we don't have housing, I don't think that businesses are going to come, because I think they're nervous about their workforce. I think we've got to get that fixed. I'm told by the chamber that the number is 3,000 units we're short. I talked to a member of the Planning Commission yesterday. He thinks we're 5,500 units short in the number of housings that we need to be healthy here. That's apartments, houses, all kinds of housing. So I think that that's our biggest problem. I think when we talk to folks who are coming from western Nebraska wanting to move to Cheyenne, get away from home but not get too far and take a job, they see what the cost of housing and the lack of housing here is. The number of people that we have in Colorado who are living there, not because they want to live in Colorado, but because they just can't find housing here. About 500 of those are base employees. And I can think of, if you get those 500 people to move back to Cheyenne, the impact that would have on our economy. So I think we need to fix housing first.
What is your position on utilizing tax increment financing for special districts? And which organization would you support to manage the distribution of the funds generated?
Yeah, I think cities have a toolbox of things that they can use. TIF districts, urban renewal areas, sewer and water districts. Those are some that I think we already have the tools to do. But I think there's probably other tools that I'm not aware of that other communities are doing. And a wise man told me you just need to go out and look and see what everybody else is doing and steal their ideas and bring them here. And I think that's what we need to do. I just think they're tools that we've used a TIF on the DDA, and that's the only one that I can ever remember, and it's not in place currently. It's a tool that we can use to put in infrastructure and enable a development to happen, and the money that development spins off helps pay back the costs of doing that, and it helps make the development happen. So I can think of things like the Heinz Building in the Hole. I can think of areas like the hitching post, where we've had that fire in that blighted area there, where we could put a TIF in, where we could bring the infrastructure and we could remediate the buildings and tear those down, or whatever we need to do, that would allow then for other developers to come in, and their success would pay for it. Because right now, it's been the Heinz Building's been empty for 35 years. If we don't do anything, we're not going to get any more money. So as a community, why not? If we can get 100 people living downtown in the Heinz Building, or whatever it's going to be working downtown, that would spin off all of the economic growth that would happen in the community. So why we don't get the sales tax or the property taxes for a short period of time, long term, it enhances what we're trying to do. And so I think URAs, TIF districts, water and sewer districts, we need to be aggressive in using those to build sewer lines, to build roads that we might need that would allow land to be developed for affordable housing. I'm thinking like the land south of Orchard Valley. There's 3 or 4 developers own it, and it's ripe for affordable housing. But we need to build a couple of roads down there, and we need to build a sewer line. Well, if we TIF'd that area, then it could help pay for that cost of that infrastructure, and we could get it done right away. So,
just to follow up on that, there appears to be some opposition on the concept of TIF. Are you aware of that with some of the current council members, and how would you bridge that gap or move it forward?
yeah, I think there's some folks maybe that are involved with schools, with the county, because if we do a TIF, they may not get their money right away. But my answer would be, we're going to get 100% of nothing now, but for this project. But if we do the project, then the revenue would come in. It might take us 10, 15 years to pay it off. But then if you look at what the what the impact to the community would be, the repayment would be very short. So I think it's a math problem. We just need to sit down and show them how it would work. And if we have shared goals, which I think affordable housing would be one, I think the council would probably agree with, then we just need to figure out what tools do we have. And I think once we educate them on that, I think we can get there. I hope anyways, because I think it's really important.
Thank you.
For many years, the mayor and the city council have been reluctant to revisit the issue of a non-discrimination ordinance to protect LGBTQ plus people. As mayor, would you support the reintroduction of the issue of a non-discrimination ordinance? Why or why not?
So I've been saying since the beginning that we are the capital city of the equality state, and from my perspective, we shouldn't condone discrimination of any kind. Period. And I don't know what else needs to be said. I mean, that should be our stance as a community. As far as an ordinance goes, I think that I would be in support of doing something like that, but I'd have to see the language. I mean, I think I would want to see the language before I would be supportive of that. But if our goal is to not have discrimination in the community, then, and I believe we shouldn't have discrimination in our community, period.
Given the frustrations voiced by developers and property owners on the process of getting city approvals for projects or permits, what would you personally do to improve the process?
Well, I think one of the things right off the bat that I found out is that we have really high turnover in that department. Talking with Charles Bloom, who is the development director, they were paying planners in the $30,000 range to start. And so these young men and women would get out of college, they would come to Cheyenne, they would get experience, and then within a year they would move 80 miles south and they'd take a job for $20,000 more, and we'd have to start over. So it seems to me the development process should be paying for the development office, and I think that there's enough money coming in to do that. We just need to make sure, first of all, that if turnover is the problem that I'm led to believe it is, so you start with a process, somebody new comes in, you have to start all over again, I think we need to fix that problem. I think that would be one. And then I think you're right, we do have some silo issues. There's a community down in Colorado who was facing similar problems, and they put all the people into one department that review. And I kind of liked the thought of that. COVID happened, and I haven't been able to get down to visit with them to see how that works. But I did talk to them on the phone. And so the inspectors, the plan reviewers, they're all in one department under one person. And it just seems to me that if their goal is clearly stated and they're all working on the same team, that we might have some more success that way. But I think we need to look at everything. My friend who owns McDonald's was talking to me about timing. And so their goal is to get people through their drive-through. So they've looked at every piece of it. And so when you go up and you get your order, they don't give you the receipt when you pay. They give you the receipt at the other end, because it takes 3 seconds to print that receipt, and you do that times every one. So they've gotten down to that level of detail in time. And if you can do that times 200 cars, how many more cars can you get a day? Well, I think we need to do the same thing with the development office. We need to look at the process and what everything takes time, what time does it take, and what time is necessary, and what things can we fix. So I'll give you a couple of examples right off the bat that I think are important. So when you do a preliminary plat right now, they're asking for all the stuff like on a final site plan. They're asking for elevations, they're asking for landscaping, a final landscape plan. And then they're calling you back and saying, well, I'm counting the trees and you're 3 trees short, and we're locked up on that in the preliminary plat time. Well, that doesn't make sense to me. A preliminary plat should be the 30,000-foot view. Can you do the drainage? Can you do the traffic? Just the basics. Does this site actually work? And there shouldn't be any sort of requirements to do a site plan at that point, I don't think. And then when we get into the final plat, then we get into the details and doing that. So instead of spending so much time up front doing that, and I think that would help staff too, if we're not so tied up, doing things early, then having to do the same exercise later, they'd have more time to work. So those are a couple things that I've learned so far in just talking to developers. But I think as we get into it more, I think we'll be able to find a lot of areas where we can save time and frustration. Last thing I would tell you is, what I keep hearing from developers is they ask a question and the answer comes back with a new requirement. And so they answer that, and then it comes back with a new requirement. I think we need to be more upfront about what we want, and not have that constant back and forth. I mean, there's always going to be some of those, but I think we can do a much better job of knowing what we want up front. It'll save time, and it'll save cost, and it'll sure be a lot less frustrating.
Great, thanks.
Wyoming ranks near the bottom of the country when it comes to the gender pay gap. What do you think can be done on the municipal level to improve gender equality in Cheyenne?
Another Lindsay question. Well, I think first thing we have to do is have our house in order. So when I first got on city council, Mayor Spiker found that the ladies who were in his administration were paid significantly less than the men. And he fixed that. And I think that those are some of the things that we can do to role model that. Short of that, I'm not sure what else we can do. As far as I don't know that I could, tell the newspaper how they're going to pay their employees as a municipal person. I think that probably is going to come from someplace higher. However, I do think that we can raise the issue. We can talk about those things. As part of my focus group, we talked a little bit about some issues like accessibility for ADA, talking about racial things. I think those are some of the things that, while we may not have a lot of control over, we can sure talk about it as a community and see what we can do to help make a difference there. But I think the first thing we can do is make sure our own house is Cheyenne is in order, and hopefully be a good role model from there.
The city budget has taken some hits as a result of the energy crisis and the COVID-19 pandemic. What are your city budget priorities, both during the ongoing pandemic and afterward? And what would be your priorities in regards to city spending?
Well, I saw on Mayor Orr's Facebook page this morning that sales tax revenues for 2020 August were higher than 2019 in August. So that's a positive note. Haven't had a chance to look at that. I'm guessing full service restaurants are low, but outdoor sports and other areas are higher. But that's good news that in our pandemic that things are going a little bit better. From a priority point of view, I think the first thing you have to do is the health, safety, welfare stuff. So when you call 911, the citizens have to know that a police officer and a fire truck are going to show up in a timely manner. They're going to be well trained and well equipped, and they're going to do a good job. That when you turn on your faucet, that your water is going to be some of the best in the nation, and that's not going to change. And that when you flush your toilet or pull the plug on your bathtub, that the water treatment plant is going to work. Those types of things. So I think that that has to be our priority, and still having some of the quality of life stuff to make sure that like the Civic Center, while it's not a profitable place, it sure is an important thing for the quality of life of our community. And our Ice and Events Center, it's actually making a profit in February before COVID. They'd gotten it down to the point where it was actually like $25,000 in the black, and was looking good for the year, that they found the secret sauce to making that one work. But we have to make sure that we have that balance of recreational facilities and things like that are open for the residents. And so I would definitely prioritize that. And you haven't asked me about roads, but I will tell you that's going to be a really high priority for me. Hopefully the City Council will share that idea. We get $4.5 million a year in the fifth penny sales tax, but we have $28 million sitting in the bank we haven't spent from not this current fifth penny, but the previous one, the current fifth penny, and the sixth penny that we passed, 4 years ago. There's $28 million. When I met with our treasurer here a few months ago, that hasn't been spent. And so I think those dollars, with a 4.5, we need to spend about $10 million a year for the next 10 years to get our roads back into shape. We have a $144 million deferred maintenance deficit on our roads currently. It's $1 billion thing. So for me, definitely high priority for me is going to be roads. And you can't spend the road money on anything else. It was voted on by the voters to be roads, but we're going to work really hard on getting to the basics of road maintenance and getting the roads back into passable numbers. I have all the the stuff here, but they go from good to satisfactory, I think, to fair, and we're down in that third category now. We've dropped in the last few years another whole category, and with $4.5 million a year, we'll be well below that another 4 or 5 years. So we've got to get started, and we've got to take a long-term approach. So the life cycle of a road, Ken Lewis told me this years ago, and every expert I've talked to says the same thing. You build a new road, and as soon as you build the road, it's going to start to crack. So you crack fill, and you crack fill. Every time there's a crack, you fill it so that water can't get underneath and ruin what happens underneath the road and form a crack, a pothole. And then someplace between 5, 7, 10 years later, you're going to put a seal coat on it. It could be a sand seal, it could be an oil seal, it could be a chip seal, but you got to put something on there that seals the road so water can't get in, keeps the UV rays from destroying the oil on the top, and that's good for another 10 years. And then you got to grind off an inch, and you got to put a new coat of fresh asphalt on it, and then you start crack filling again, and then 7 to 10 years later, you do a seal on it, and then 10 years after that, you do another grind and overlay, and you can do that for 80 to 100 years. So if you can stay up on the maintenance, then it's not that expensive to run roads. But once you let them go, then it's like $1 million a mile or more to take care of them. So our job is to make sure that our good roads right now, we got to get them sealed and make sure they don't further deteriorate, and then start picking away at the roads. And the goal would be that every 10 years, we'll have major maintenance on every road in the Cheyenne at least once every 10 years. We have 341 miles of roads and about a little over 1,000 lane miles of roads. So it's a huge undertaking. But when I saw $144 million, it made me think we were talking YDOT, not Cheyenne. And so it's a big deal. And so if you're asking what a budget priority for me will be, is to make sure that we go to the 6-penny sales tax and we ask the voters again to put the maintenance of those roads on there. When I was on the city council, Amber Ash and I challenged Representative Byrd to fix that. You could build roads on the 6-penny, but you couldn't do any maintenance on them. It made no sense to me. You know, you're letting us build these roads, but we don't have enough money. And so I get a call from the LSO, and it's like, come on down, help us write a bill. By God, he got it passed. So the last 6-penny was the first time we've ever put maintenance on for roads, and I think that's going to have to be an ongoing thing. But once we get where roads are stabilized, then instead of being $10 or $12 million a year, it could fall back to $4 or $5 million a year after that. So it's something that we need to get ahead of and get on it. So.
At some point, we're going to come up for a renewal in another year or so. What are your priorities for the next round of the 6-penny sales tax project?
Yeah, so definitely for my priorities, the highest priority would be asking for some money for roads. And then I haven't really sat down with the city council to find out. I know they've been working on what their goals would be, so I'd need to learn what those are. But I would love to see some recreation go on there. I think it needs to be a small percentage, but we need to constantly be working on quality of life. So we need to take care of the things that are important, but a small percentage always has to be, how do we improve the quality of life? Because I think if we're trying to ask businesses to invest in our community, I mean, low-hanging fruit is you got to have good schools, you got to have good parks, you got to have good roads. I mean, I get that. But also I think we have to have some quality of life stuff that young families would be able to do to recruit, because the competition for good employees is hard. And we need to make sure we're doing that.